Hello all, this is Piyush. From today onwards, we are going to start a new series, and the series is called as Syllabus Explained. Now this series is basically for history optional, and in this particular series, we are going to go for a detailed explanation of the syllabus. Now many of you may ask this question, that the syllabus of history itself has been given in a very detailed way, then what is the need of it? No, actually there is a need of it. So I'll just tell you that why there is a great amount of need to explain the syllabus properly. But before I get into that, let me tell you one thing very frankly, that any exam that you write, syllabus does play a very important role. Precisely when you talk about UPSC Civil Services examination, now syllabus does play a very important role. So either you talk about the GS syllabus or the optional syllabus, and for that matter any optional syllabus, ultimately you must understand one thing, that a proper decoded and well explained syllabus is very much needed, because ultimately your questions are completely based on the syllabus. But then when it comes to history optional, students normally commit couple of mistakes, because of what? Ultimately they are not able to produce the desired result. Now what are the problems? What students normally do in history optional? When it comes to history optional, frankly speaking, there are two patterns which are very popular among the students, and that is the reason because of what? They are not able to somehow comprehend the syllabus properly, and they are not able to prepare the subject in such a way, the way the syllabus has been given. What are these problems? The problems are very simple. First, most of the students, those who are having history as an optional paper, they mainly focus on the PYQs, the previous year questions. Now what is true for the PYQs? It is not necessary that in PYQs you can find that every dimension of the aspect of the syllabus has been asked previously. When it comes to the history syllabus, frankly speaking, what happens? There are a couple of topics, at one point of time they were very important, but in future they do not remain that much important. There are a great amount of possibilities that there are certain new topics which are gradually getting more limelight, and that is the reason because of what? The reflection of these kind of things you find more in your paper. But since your preparation is completely based on the PYQs, what happens? That you focus more on those dimensions which have been asked previously, and you ignore completely the dimensions which have not been asked before. So what happens? Since these dimensions are completely ignored by you, that is the reason because of what? You never prepare those dimensions or those topics or those aspects of various topics, because of what? You remain completely untouched, or those topics remain completely untouched by you, and that creates the problem. Because when the questions are coming from those dimensions, and let me tell you one thing very frankly, that if you'll see the question paper of the history optional, we'll find that each and every question that has been framed by them, ultimately they are somehow directly from the syllabus. But since your preparation was completely based on the PYQs, that is the reason because of what? You haven't collected proper amount of content on those topics, and that's why you face difficulties while writing the answers of these questions. And the second problem is basically the moment you decide history optional, majority of those students, those who have decided to cover the syllabus by their own, what they do, basically since after seeing the syllabus, they are trying to somehow prepare the content from one source. So whenever you have been trying to collect the content from one book or one source, what happens? That book has not been designed, or it is not being written in order to cater the requirements of UPSC Civil Services examination for history optional. That is the reason because of what? There are many such topics which remain completely untouched by you. So when it comes to the preparation of history optional, what happens? There are so many topics you have ignored. Why? Because they were not present in a particular book or a specific book that you have been reading. And for that matter, let me tell you very frankly that any book that you read, ultimately you will find that some of the topics are missing. Maybe in one book some other set of topics are missing, in the other book some other set of topics are missing, but ultimately certain topics are missing. That is the reason because of what? Ultimately you face difficulties. So that is the reason because of what? The syllabus must be comprehended by you properly, it must be decoded by you properly, it must be explained by you properly, right? That you can cover all those requirements which are necessary or which are needed for the syllabus. So that is the reason because of what we have been starting this series like call as Syllabus Explained, and in fact we won't be going into like much extensive sessions, rather in smaller sessions we will try to deal with 1 or 2 topics in every session, and we will try to understand that what are the things which are given in the syllabus, what are the things which are the hidden dimensions like that you need to prepare. That's how we are going to decode the syllabus, right? So in this particular session, which is called as session 1, we are going to like discuss about like 2 topics, the first 2 topics of paper 1, and these topics are basically the sources, and the second one is the prehistory and the protohistory, right? These are 2 topics. Frankly speaking, like when it comes to these 2 topics, like most of the students like ignore these 2 topics, because when it comes to sources, if like either they do not cover it, and if they cover like they go for a very traditional approach to cover like very traditional approach to cover like this particular topic. And as far as this second topic like is concerned, now that has been mostly being ignored by the students. But then if you'll see the syllabus, you'll find that there are so many things have been included in the syllabus, and in fact if not much, at least some basic content must be gathered on them. So let us see that like how to prepare it. So first of all, when it comes to the topic 1, that topic is primarily related to what? Sources, fine. Now the moment it comes to the sources, what is the general perception that we do carry with us? There were 3 kind of sources, and these are called as archaeological sources, the literary sources, and like if you are keeping the foreign accounts as a separate category, in that case you can cap it, you can call it the third category. So basically these are the 3 things which are known to us. And the moment it comes to the literary sources, we primarily focus on the Brahminical literary sources, right? And in fact like they are the religious sources, we focus more on them. But then frankly speaking, when it comes to the sources, this is one topic. First it should be understood in this way, okay, there are 2 different kind of topics which are being used for history writing, that's called as primary sources and the secondary sources. And like I must tell you that these words have been very much used by them as the primary sources and the secondary sources. Now that has been used here, like there is a reason behind it. So if we'll see that how the syllabus is being given to you, so first of all let's see that in the syllabus they have mentioned first the exploration. So sources, and then it comes to like the archaeological sources. So this is one category, fine. And within this archaeological sources, they have given exploration, then they have included excavation, right? Then they have included epigraphy, then numismatic and monuments. Now, when you prepare for history optional, what is like the process which is being followed by you? Frankly speaking, you ignore everything, right? You ignore everything and you focus on just 2 dimensions. And what are these 2? This is epigraphy, that is the study of basically the inscription, and then it is the numismatic. So while doing the archaeological sources, you just focus on these 2 sources, epigraphy and numismatic. But then as you can see that there are certain other terminologies which are also here, such as exploration, then excavation, and then monuments. So if they are given in the syllabus, why do you think that the question cannot be asked on them? Of course they can be asked. So when it comes to like questions being asked from archaeological sources, frankly speaking, like earlier they used to simply ask the questions from these two parts. And if we'll say the questions coming from these 2 parts, again I'll say that normally the questions coming from these 2 sources, they are very simple. How come like the inscriptions, or let's say the coins are helping us in writing the history. But then the questions could be very much asked on the monuments also, that how come the monuments are helping in writing history. And if you'll notice the questions of the recent years, you'll find that actually they have asked questions on the monuments, but then they haven't simply asked the question on monuments, rather they have linked it basically with one of the periods. Let's say it may be Mauryan period, or it may be post-modern period. Mostly they have asked the question on the post-modern period, and they have linked how come the monuments are basically their examples of art and culture, like they are their architecture, sorry, like these are helping us in the reconstruction of history. That is the crux of the question. So they have asked the questions in this way. So they have what to understand here. If these terms have been written here, in that case it is highly probable that they'll ask the question from this part. But then as I did tell you that you do not focus on these terms, like for you what is like archaeology archaeological source, epigraphy and numismatic. These are the two archaeological sources, and that's why you focus on them. But let me tell you very categorically, now these have become very old fashions and the from the old tradition, and that is how now they have started hunting the new dimensions. And in fact, being a serious aspirant, it is really important for you that you cover all of them, right? When it comes to the literary sources, again coming to the literary sources, first of all, as you can see that there are two terms which have been highlighted, that's primary and the secondary sources. Frankly speaking, being UPSC aspirants, we focus only on the primary source. We do not focus much on the secondary source. Now, secondary sources are basically those books which have been written on the basis of the primary sources, and in fact, that is being called by us as historiography. But then it does work as source, and that's why you can expect certain questions from this part also. But then you don't need to prepare each and every book. But then there are a couple of important books that may be important for you. So far they haven't asked a single question on this secondary source. But then of course primary is important, but then you should have the idea of secondary sources, and most importantly how the secondary sources are being used by the historians in order to write the history. Okay. Now if we'll come to some sub themes within it. Frankly speaking, when it comes to covering literary sources, the major focus has been paid to the religious literature. In the religious literature, we mainly talk about Brahminical. We mainly talk about Brahminical, correct? But then apart from this also, there are two more categories that we should keep in mind, that is Buddhist and the Jain sources, fine. But as I have told you that most of the time we focus more on the Brahminical sources, and within the Brahminical sources also you should keep in mind that we mostly focus on couple of or let's say very limited sources. But there are possibilities of multiple kind of questions only from the Brahminical sources, such as a separate question can be asked on Vedas, right? A separate question you can find on Vedas. You can find a separate question on epics as well. Puranas have been asked by them multiple times, that's why we are aware of it, right? Then the question can be noticed from or can be asked from Dharma Shastra as well. So if we'll talk about simply the Brahminical sources, there are lots of possibilities from this part, but then unfortunately we talk a few of them, whether a few of them are being ignored, and that is the reason because of what you need to cover these topics also, such as Veda is important. Dharma Shastra, let me tell you, it's very, very, very important, and in fact there is great possibility of multiple questions. They have asked earlier also one or two questions on Dharma Shastras, but then we haven't seen it in this way, the way we are supposed to see it, because when the question has been asked on Dharma Shastras, they are not simply asking how come Dharma Shastras are helping us in writing the history. It's not that simple. They have actually mixed it with the Varna system, or let's say they have linked it with the inscriptions. So this kind of innovative questions they have been asking, but let me tell you very frankly that now they have started getting into these kind of dimensions, and that's how you have to collect proper information on these sources also. Apart from that, as far as the Buddhist sources are there, no specific kind of specific source we can expect, but then Buddhist source in general and the Jain source in general, they are very important. But apart from this, what should be noticed here, that they have given so many other examples or other sub themes also, such as they have given poetry. Now it is given separately. Then they have given scientific literature, they have given the normal literature, and then most importantly the literature in the regional languages. Again I'll say you unfortunately we do not pay proper attention to these parts, but then frankly speaking, from each and every source there is a possibility of questions. And that's why if it is let's say simply if they have been asking that how come the ancient poetries are helping us in writing the history, that may be a very important question, but then we are not ready for these kind of questions. You should always keep in mind scientific literature. Now couple of scientific literature, but then if it is given in the sources, in that case why don't you think that you should prepare it as a source also? Let's say if this question is only coming, how come the scientific literature of ancient India do help us in writing or reconstructing the past of ancient India? Now this kind of question can be framed, but then you have to ask this question to yourself that whether you are ready for these kind of questions or not. Then literature, okay, that is okay, like, in literature is a very generic term, so there's like, of course anybody can attempt this. But when it comes to the regional languages and the way the history is getting more diverse, and the way history is history is becoming more, more region centric, right, rather than the, it is like, somehow focusing in the central part. So that is how we can say the regional literature is also becoming day by day important, and frankly speaking, you should pay proper attention to it, and in fact, I'll give a sort of star mark to it, because this is there you can find the future, and in fact, you should at least try to cover some important literatures, like, those which are there in the ancient times only, right? That is how you are ready with this particular part, sources. So don't go or follow the same old traditional approach, because in that case your result won't be very good, like, in history option, and then, like, you'll keep on complaining that the marks are not coming in history. Okay, fine. Then it comes to foreign accounts. Frankly speaking, there is nothing much to be discussed here, because there are three sorts of, like, sort of foreign accounts have been given: Greeks, Chinese and Arabs. And in fact, we do study about them, and on regular basis we can find that after every gap of 2 to 3 years, you can find that one question is coming from the foreign account. So this needed to be prepared. So there is nothing new to be discussed in this part. Okay. Now moving to the topic 2. Now the topic 2 is precisely about the prehistory and the proto-history. As I told you earlier also, that this is one dimension or one topic which is highly ignored by the students, and they focus just on one part. And what is it? This is the Neolithic. So most of the students do focus on Neolithic only. But then if you believe that the questions are not possible from the, like, Paleolithic and the Mesolithic, that is incorrect. Now Mesolithic period is a period of the great transition, and in fact these days there are some great debates about, like, the Mesolithic period. Debates as in, like, how come it was securing the transition from one period to another period. And let me tell you very frankly that when it comes to ancient Indian history, the word transition does play a very significant role. And in fact, I must tell you that, like, throughout this ancient India, or throughout this, like, study of ancient India, you should keep in your mind that transition does play a very important role, and any period which falls in between, like, they are very important. In the same fashion, the Mesolithic is falling in between, and that's how, as I told you, that you should try to cover it with respect to the transition. So a question is very much possible from the, like, Mesolithic period. When it comes to Neolithic, again I would like to say that look at geographical factors. In fact, there are several debates, okay, which are based on these geographical factors. And in fact, if you'll see the diffusedness theory, now the whole diffusedness theory is based on this. And like in 1 year they had asked a question on the Neolithic by linking with the geographical factors. They have asked about the multiple zones of multiple zones of Neolithic. So basically it is the linkage of these two sub themes of the syllabus. So look, Neolithic is undoubtedly okay, you prepare Neolithic, but in Neolithic also you just focus on one dimension, and what is it? That is the Neolithic revolution or the Neolithic transition. But then I am telling you that there are possibilities, right, between these two. And in fact, apart from this also, like when you use the word the beginning of agriculture, or let's say you can use an alternative word, that is the domestication of plants. Now these are certain things which could be also understood in multiple other ways. That like how come the historians are explaining the transition, right? What might be the positive factors? What is the role of geographical factors in this transition? So these are several dimensions that may be asked to you. But that is how you should prepare this particular part in this way. So you have to somehow unfold couple of new dimensions of the Neolithic also. Surprisingly, there is another topic in this part that is called as Chalcolithic, which is highly ignored by the students. But again, I should tell you that when it comes to the Chalcolithic, it is also a period of transition. Earlier, the Chalcolithic period had been given lesser importance. Why? Because there were lesser works on Chalcolithic, and since there were lesser works, and that's why the less probability was there for framing the questions. So we had focus in this way, Neolithic and then IBC, and after IBC, since the Aryans are coming, and that is how we emphasize more on the Vedic period, and then history completely goes towards a different direction, and in between somewhere the Chalcolithic is coming. But then you should always keep in mind that any further development without achieving that stage of Chalcolithic was impossible. And that is how it does play a very significant role for the development of multiple cultures. When it comes to the Chalcolithic, you should not see it only with respect to the Chalcolithic culture, rather it should be comprehended by you in three different ways. So one is basically Harappan Chalcolithic culture, the second one is basically the non-Harappan Chalcolithic culture, and third is basically the copper hoard culture. So basically there were three different copper cultures which were there, or the Chalcolithic cultures which were there in India, and in fact they were spread to various parts of India, and in fact they had worked majorly for facilitating the transition from the Stone Age to the Iron Age. And in that regard it becomes very important, and in fact if you see the last question probably asked in 2022 or 2023, it was asking the same thing, how it was working as a phase of transition. So the Chalcolithic period is recently has become quite important, and that is why you should cover this particular topic also quite carefully. So when it comes to these two topics, I have just told you that how to see these two topics, and don't see it in a very superficial way, because if you have this approach, in that case you won't get the desired result. So please follow this approach, follow this approach to see this or cover these two first topics. So in the next session we'll be coming up with the two more topics, right? So keep on watching us and keep on following us. Thank you very much.